Hello and welcome to this presentation on skills-based science for the middle school. This is my first attempt at doing something like this, PowerPoint out over YouTube, and I'd love to have some feedback on it if you think it's anything that's worthwhile as a PD exercise when we aren't able to meet face to face. Hopefully get some information out to you here on a couple of things. Wanted to look at the upcoming grade 6 science assessment and also just touch on those skills outcomes that we keep pushing keep talking about for middle school science. So first off, just want to kind of look back, I guess, at what New Brunswick is currently doing and what the assessment schedule looks like from K to 12, and some of this you'd be familiar with in the middle school level, but if you look at the assessment, it just looks to me like a bit of a treadmill that we're on here. We assess at grade 2 and grade 3 and a couple of times in grade 4 and 3 times in grade 5 and then grade 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11, and it's one of those things you never kind of get off the treadmill. You just keep going from assessment to assessment. And that's what we've been doing in New Brunswick for the last 10 years. And so it's, we do these assessments on a 10-year cycle, and the current schedule is coming to a close. And so I'll share with you what we're looking at as far as assessment for the next 10 years. So this is the new Brunswick assessment program, and you can see it's a little more concise. We're assessing at grade 4 and grade 6 and grade 10, and right across the curriculum in those three grades in particular. We're looking at literacy and mathematics and scientific literacy, and also French oral proficiency at grade 6 and grade 10. This will do a couple of things for us. One of the things it does, it's kind of nice, is it allows us to track that same group of students at grade 4 and then again at grade 6 and at grade 10 in science literacy, which we've not had an opportunity to do in the past, as well as in those other subjects. So just a note here on the test format for the grade 6 assessment. Some of you would be familiar with this from the field test that was done last May, but the format's a little different than what we've done in the past for assessment, in that the questions and the free response are spread amongst 4 booklets, and each child is responsible, or each child is given just one of the booklets to do. So it means that the exam, rather than being a couple of hours long and has to be done over a number of different days, it can be administered within a single class period, which is nice to administer, and also we think will allow for more focus from the student. So there are a number of different booklets. They're assigned randomly throughout your class, and each student will just do one booklet that has 13 multiple choice and 1 constructed response. Last year during the field test, a number of the booklets were bilingual and designated for French immersion students. I'm not sure if they're going to continue with that this year, or if they're just going to make all of the booklets bilingual, so that if booklet B, for instance, is given to one of our one of the core English students, they would do the English side. If it's given to a French immersion student, they would have the option of doing either side. It's a bilingual booklet. The pages on the left are English, the pages on the right are French, and the student would work on whichever side they felt more comfortable on. As I mentioned at the outset, the assessment really is focusing on those skills outcomes rather than the knowledge outcomes. The knowledge, I look at that as sort of serving as the vehicle to convey the skills along. So when you look at the weighting of the test, 40% of it will be on initiating and planning, 15% on performing and recording, a 30% in analyzing and interpreting, and a further 5% on those STSE outcomes. Now, those will all be done within the framework of those conceptual understanding. So, the analyzing and interpreting will be of scientific endeavors. It would be that would be the vehicle that would drive those forward. If you're familiar with the PCAP test that is done here in Canada, or PISA at the grade 10 level, the questions will be very, very similar to that. So here's a PCAP question that I pulled off of a document that can be found online. And you can see it is tied a little bit to some of our science curriculums on water and erosion and things like that. But the information is they're not asked to recall information. A lot of the information is given right in the question. So talks about an experiment that's done, and it asks you to describe what would happen if the slant was increased, but the same amount of water is used. So a description of an experiment, and just asking them to draw some conclusions from what they see. So I want to change gears a little bit away from the test itself and focus on skills and the teaching of science. But if you want more information, and you want to know where to find some resources that are aligned with the New Brunswick assessment that's being done in May, or if you just have questions about it in general, feel free to drop me an email at darren.white@nbed.nb.ca, and I'll do my best to get some information back to you. Or if you would like me to come down and take a look at something with you, I'm more than happy to do that. Just get in contact with me. But I want to take a look now at what does a science class, if you think back to some of your science classes that looked great, one of those science classes that you just hated to see it end because some neat things were going on in it. What were some of the things that were going on well during those classes? So just think about that for a second. And compare your thoughts or your answers, I guess, to this was a contract that was drawn up between some students and their teacher in a school, and these were some of the things that the students indicated that would make science work well for them. So things like they needed to have practical hands-on investigations whenever they could. They needed questions to investigate to make them think and understand and progress through the science. Working together collaboratively. They wanted the teacher to be enthusiastic and knowledgeable. They wanted some great resources to help them learn. They wanted to work with familiar contexts that they recognize and that they can relate to. And they wanted to be able to learn outside of the classroom and also by having visitors in the school. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of those great classes that you we're thinking about would have some overlap with some of these things that were in this science contract that was being held in this classroom. One of the challenges, of course, and I know that many of you are well along this arrow, much further than I was when I was teaching, but I remember when I started to teach, I just thought, well, if I can make them understand the lesson and remember it, then I've done my job. And that's definitely part of what we do. But that remembering piece, somebody told me earlier in the year, I was at a session, and somebody said, knowledge is cheap now. So many of us carry around Google on our cell phone in our pockets that that knowledge piece is easily accessible. And so what we need to do is move them from that memory piece up through to the right and to being able to analyze and apply that information, and ultimately to evaluate it and create new information from what they've learned. So I know we're in different places along this continuum, and we may find some classes where we're way over to the right, and other classes where we're way back to the left, and that's fine. Just to continue to be aware that the continuum is there, and to strive to move to the right as often as we can on it.
This is a Formula One race car. It is one of the finest pieces of engineering in the entire world. It goes 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, has nearly 1,000 horsepower, and cornered at 4 Gs, so hard you can barely breathe. But it's not just a fine piece of engineering. It's also incredibly exciting. So exciting that tens of millions of fans around the world gather around every week and watch this race around the track. I myself, as a 10-year-old boy, was one of those fans. And it ended up inspiring me to study engineering, to try and figure out, how does that work? Why does it go so fast? What is it made out of? And throughout my course of engineering at Dartmouth College in graduate school and undergraduate, I found myself leading a race car team, building a car like this, and studying equations like we see here about the vehicle dynamics, the suspension geometry required to achieve that. Understanding how to make a part of steel tubing incredibly strong so it wouldn't break because we're building a race car, but also incredibly light because we're building a race car. And I spent night after night getting deep into these formulas. But it was all exciting and worth it because we were building a race car. Now imagine if my parents had forced me to memorize this equation of angular momentum and torque and how they relate before allowing me to watch a Formula One race. Now it seems funny and crazy, but that's exactly what we're doing in education. We're forcing students to memorize seemingly irrelevant and mundane and boring details before allowing them to see the beauty and excitement intrinsic to every subject that they're about to study. And this is backwards. So why are we doing it this way? Well, it's not because we don't care. The fact in education is that education is created by experts. And experts suffer from the curse of knowledge. And the curse of knowledge makes it difficult for experts to understand how the beauty of the subject that got them excited in that subject in the first place, without understanding every last detail that they're now so deeply involved with. And this curse of knowledge has a negative impact on education. Carl Wyman notes that well-intentioned physicists are achieving poor educational results because the curse of knowledge makes it very difficult for them to understand how physics is best understood by the novice student. And the result of this curse of knowledge, the result of the fact that education is created by experts, is a very boring curriculum. We start with details, and we bore students and make them memorize, again, seemingly irrelevant facts because they have no context for those facts and figures and dates. And then we try and force them to get into some more advanced and intermediate topics and try and force them down this learning path that we think is right. And then, if we haven't bored them to death, they get to see and appreciate some of the big ideas that make each subject so exciting. And what we need to do is flip this entire curriculum. And we need to start with the big ideas. Because when you start with big ideas, you do two incredible things. One, you give students a great context and relevance and meaning for the subject they're about to study. And you also create inspiration and motivation, the type that inspired me to study engineering. And then, when you have this context and motivation, you're able to create a natural and a not forced learning path. Because that excitement, that motivation, leads you to ask questions. How and why? And then, by answering those questions, you get to organically build a very deep knowledge and a deep expertise that's required in any particular field. Because you need to understand the formulas to make sure that car doesn't break, yet goes as fast as possible. Now, this idea of inverting the curriculum is broader than just a classroom. Yet we have seen research that shows that it works on a classroom setting. For example, a study at the Stanford Graduate School of Education took two groups of undergraduate students studying neuroscience. And in one, they did the traditional method of reading a text, then doing an exercise, and then taking a test. And in another group, they let them start with a hands-on exercise about what they were about to learn. And what they found was that the group that started with some context, some motivation, some exploration, performed 25 to 30% better. Now again, this is on a classroom setting, and what I'm talking about is taking the underlying ideas that make this effective and applying that to the entire curriculum on a year or multi-year approach. Let's take biology, for example. Many of us in this room probably took introductory biology in high school or college. And you may remember a diagram like this, a eukaryotic cell. And you should remember it because it dominates the first few chapters of any biology textbook. And you look at this scary-looking diagram with words you can hardly pronounce, and you may think to yourself, what the hell is a rough endoplasmic reticulum? And why should I care? Well, a group of biology professors at Grinnell College had that same frustration. And instead of forcing these students to go through a curriculum of prerequisites in biology and chemistry and microbiology, they thought, why can't we invert the curriculum? What happens if we give students a glimpse of how beautiful biology really is? And they created an introductory course that did exactly that, that started with real-world research challenges, with topics for an introductory course that sound like phenomenally interesting TED Talks, the sex life of plants, biological responses to stress, how to build an animal. And this is an introductory course in college that got students excited about biology. And what they found was that this introductory course helped both ends of the spectrum. They found that students who were never going to end up majoring in biology were able to appreciate the beauty of biology and then go on to appreciate that in other walks of their life. And they helped some students find a love for biology and go on to be biology majors and researchers and scientists. And if you take this back to the textbook example, we need to take that textbook and completely invert it. And instead of starting with the eukaryotic cell, we should start with what biology really is, which is life itself. And what makes life so interesting is because we have this very rich ecosystem and ecology. And what makes our ecosystem so rich? The fact that we have an incredibly diverse array of plants and animals. And how do we get to those diverse plants and animals? Because of evolution and different evolutionary strategies. And what makes evolution function? Genetics and genes. And what underpins genes? DNA. And how does DNA replicate? And what makes it possible? The eukaryotic cell. And what the hell does a rough endoplasmic reticulum do? It helps facilitate protein folding, without which none of us would be here. So if we think about what we can all do to start implementing the idea of inverting the curriculum, and it starts with students, keep asking why. Don't let our education system beat the curiosity out of you. Continue to ask for meaning for the subjects that you're studying. Parents, when you're at the dinner table talking to your kids and asking them what they studied in school today, tie that to some real-world example in their life. Create that context for them. Administrators, let's think beyond standardized tests. Let's give teachers freedom to implement some of these ideas. And finally, teachers, let's get back to the passion and excitement that got you excited about teaching in the first place. Let's not scare away the next generation of great scientists and engineers and authors by making them memorize irrelevant, boring, and mundane facts before letting them see the beauty of those subjects. And take this not just in a class setting, not just a week in the start of the class, but push to apply these learnings and this idea to your entire curriculum. I'm sure glad that my parents didn't make me memorize those formulas before letting me watch a race, because it changed my life. And it led to this, being able to drive a race car that I helped design and build. And that's exciting. And so is education. And we need to show that to students. We need to help make education more relevant and exciting for all students by starting with big, beautiful, exciting ideas and inverting the curriculum. Thank you.
So I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with these TED Talks. They're great and they sound so easy. And yeah, why wouldn't we just flip the curriculum? It makes so much sense. Well, we have some challenges that make it a little harder than what would be implied through a TED Talk with getting these skills out to the students. And the first is subject knowledge. If we're not 100% confident with 100 different types of topics in science, and who is, then letting go and letting the students go down these roads if we don't know where they might end is a bit challenging, and definitely keep some of us from going to the full extent of what the TED Talk would suggest. But aside from that, there's more practical challenges that we run into all the time. We have a huge range of students in our classes, and to be able to differentiate, to provide support for the least able students while still challenging the most able students in our classes is a real challenge. One of the challenges I always had when I was teaching was laying out science investigations, and I wanted the students to get the right answer. So I would give them the procedure, and I would make sure that they measured out exactly 10 milliliters of this substance and poured it in at this time. And the results they got were exactly the results I expected, and also exactly the results that they expected. And that's not, they're not doing real science. They're following a recipe here. And I think back to my own days when I was a student doing labs, and I found myself in this situation a lot. I'd go to the lab. Sure, it was a great chance you get out of class and you get to experience the lab, which was a little different. But a lot of times, even thinking back now, I have to think, what was it that I was trying to do in that day in the lab? The goals weren't clear to me by times. So we've got some definite challenges of things that we have to kind of work with here. So take a minute and just think about some things that you can do to make your investigations less directed, but making sure that the goal is still clear and understood. And here's one suggestion, one idea, is to use some models to check for success. So have some exemplars, lots of exemplars up around your class, and you could ask the students this. You could say, well, okay, which one of these is best? Now tell me why it's the best. Come up with 4 or 5 reasons why you think one of these might be better than the rest of them. Together, maybe you'll come up with something like this. Now, what makes a good table? Well, I used a ruler. I put a title on it. I used column headings and scientific languages, and I recorded the data correctly. They might come up with others. Who knows? But the important thing here is co-construct this with your students, and then that information will be theirs. It won't be yours, and they'll be able to carry it with them that much easier than if you're just giving them, here is a good table, and I want you to do it like this. So we're saying here, give them the freedom to explore science in the way it should be explored. But you can't just come in that first day in September and say, go do science, I will see you in June. You need to make sure that you know what they know, you find out what they know, and what they can do before you get started. You have to make sure that the goals, everybody has the goals in mind. You know what skills you're trying to develop, and everybody knows what knowledge you're trying to develop as part of the curriculum. And everybody has to know what good looks like. So that's the use of those exemplars, those models that we were talking about earlier. And again, if you can co-construct those criteria with the students, so much the better. And again, make sure that they're asking questions and not being afraid of asking a stupid question or not being afraid of that failure. Because again, 9/10 of good science comes from those failures. So have them question everything. This, of course, all changes your role. My role in the classroom when I started used to be, I need to help the children get it right so my lesson is successful. And later on it became, I need to help the children learn so that lesson is successful. You're supporting learning rather than teaching. And as I said before, making those mistakes is at the very heart of learning itself. So that's it. That's all I've got. A couple of things to think about at the end of the video here. First of all, is there things that you can do in your classroom to make your science more skills-based? Can you assess those skills as part of your ongoing formative assessment regime? I would encourage you to take a look, as I said before, at things like the released PISA and PCAP exam questions. If you are looking for some of those resources, Google is your friend. They're out there on the internet. If you can't find them, shoot me off an email and I can send you the link or send you the document. And then, are there other supports that you need? If so, contact your SPR or again, fire me off an email. And if I can't help you immediately, I can track down some people that can help to move you in the right direction. But don't feel you're going at this alone. We can move forward with it together. So that's it. As I say, this is my first attempt at doing a presentation like this over YouTube. If you found it useful at all, let me know, or let me know what could be changed. If you absolutely hated it, you could let me know that as well. Well, maybe wait till Monday to let me know that you absolutely hated it. Don't ruin my weekend. But thanks for your attention, and I hope you have a great rest of the day and a great weekend.